Okay, this is going to be a rough note. I had some good ideas. Let me see if I can remember them. Adulation to the narrative. Ideological vanity. It was something to do with like the generic entities which get mentioned in a kind of diatribe of facts. I can't remember the point. But I did think I made two inventions. That there was one of them was something to disarm. The excuse, or the framing of the excuse for the counter narrative. That because it's an inverted commas counter narrative. Without a narrative, you don't have the sort of the ability to inconsistently depend on this was in conjunction with the sort of, because this is very similar to the Parmenides position on form, on the sort of the singular oneness, and it's also separate from itself and not itself and divisible in a multiplicity, all manner of multiplicity and oneness, and sort of within those contradictions. So this isn't the thing that I'm remembering, but it is worth remembering that these people are trying to be naturalists. They are trying to be the followers of Parmenides and believe in something to do with the fundamentalness of form. And then as well, they are so they've got a similar philosophy of form that then has to be rooted into a narrative framework that is given a causal power. So then they have a lever to make a real space. Effectively, they're desperately trying to use philosophy to synthesize space and room within their decrepit philosophy. Remember the point that I made, something has woven into it, it's sort of the idea that this is even an African philosophy is disgusting. It's just basically rediscovered Nazi philosophy. Demanding that things should be different. And having no real grasp of how that should occur, other than that they should be given a valuable hostage. And the sort of exploitation that they can wreak through some hostage will force the right people to fix everything for them as to their liking. It really is a kind of a form of terrorism. Doesn't have to understand anything. Something I wanted to say also about the political environment. Issues get more and more complicated in terms of needing an electorate to be responsible in ways in which, or at least in some democracies, it seems hard to envision that they can be. I heard Nigel Farage talking about if central banks should be independent. The problem is that central banks take decisions which will affect different administrations in 2 to 3 years' time. Potentially. And it can be very hard then for electorates to... Well, I mean, yeah, that is the thing, I guess. You need electorates to start to burden that level of sophisticated responsibility. Otherwise, really, there's no hope of ever conducting a successful state. Sadly, I think the only way to sort of improve standards is to have a completely alternative internal private solution that essentially just works out its own higher synthesis of certain matters, and then spreads that model within the system, rather than trying to do it from the top down. You do it somewhat organically from not. It shouldn't even be called from the bottom up. It should be called from the middle, because which requires the highest level of sophistication, because it requires creating a platform that people can actually meet each other upon and forge themselves and be owners thereof. And I don't mean owners in terms of collectively of private property. That's not even necessary. But owners of their own fate, and that they have assented to the whole thing. And then can they sleep in that bed that they've made for themselves is the real sort of question. Because it's so easy to work backwards to say, oh well, the problem is that the right people don't have the power, and we'll make up a plan afterwards. Damn, I wish I could remember those points. Something about the tools of identity politics. Oh yes, this was one of the points. Something about the bottom line. That they can remember all the individual facts of the diatribes, to sort of name and shame, and to sort of insert the narrative to make it a safe space, so that they can sort of insulate their self-esteem and extract self-esteem from everything else that has to offer it an award adulation onto the narrative that secures, this kind of umbrella that will catch anything. Depending on how you want to take the metaphor, will only catch things that support the self-esteem. The itchy trigger finger of the narcissistic injury ready to be deployed. Let me think what else. So they don't really have special regard for the detail of the diatribe. It doesn't really matter. It just matters that it sort of fits the bottom line formula. So it's too much even to be up to date on all the issues, knowing whatever the supposed reasonable interpretation is from their ideological framework and interpretation that fits the narrative that they're trying to draw. And then within that sort of obsession of rooting everything with the narrative, it can be a bit too overwhelming, to be able to sort of to profess the faith, as it were. But they know what it should sound like. They know the formula. They know the bottom line. They know what the bottom line should be. So that's all they know, really. That's what they really have to keep track of, and what they have to police, which is the bottom line. which is adulation to the narrative, no individual discourse, no interpersonal evaluation of anything. It has to be representatives of identity factions and generic entities, or everything is generic other than the thing that deserves the narcissistic regard, the narcissistic love. And it's this kind of bottom line thinking as to why they safely, just like, sort of extracting damage on their hostage to force things to get fixed according to the way that they should, at a bottom line level, feel the love. Has always been a kind of sympathy. Oh yeah, there was another point, I don't know if this was the other big main point, which is how the elites end up having to just simply become identity mongers. They just merely have to sell people their identity because it's so confusing, all these, sort of details that one has to remember, that you just essentially want an identity gatekeeper or curator that lets you know that you are actually the beloved identity, that you are its member, and you are thinking the right things, and you are on the right side of history even. And it's such a sort of important it's of such psychological importance that it sort of overrides all other issues. And so that comfort overriding political necessity. Identity becomes almost a new fetish that itself displaces all other fetishes, and they exist within it. And my metaphor doesn't quite extend so well, but in terms of information and knowledge itself.